apologize for the really long break, but welcome back to GassyVampyre. I'm really glad to see you here. Now, the reason why I took a very long break was mostly because I wanted to sit down and really think about how I wanted to execute this channel from here on out, and I decided that I would take a lot more time to do research and picture finding and making sure that I didn't leave out any of the fine details in any of the cases that I discuss here on the channel. So before we begin, if stories about the dark and macabre and also the mysterious are your thing, then do not forget to press that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way you don't miss a single episode from this channel, and trust me when I say, you're not gonna want to. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Today's case happened to be one of those cases where I spent a lot of time researching it. I have pages and pages full in my notebook of it, and there was media stuff, there was photos, there was all sorts of stuff that they found at the scene and everything, and I'm about to share all of that with you guys today in this video. And let me just say that it is going to absolutely blow your mind, because not only is this case kind of creepy and kind of scary, but also the fact that the person involved in this case was only 10 years old. Yeah, 10 years old. We're covering a child killer today. Today's story is the story of Mary Bell. Mary was born on May 26, 1957, in Corbridge, Northumberland, England, to her mother, Betty McCricket. It is unknown who Mary's real father was, but the person who was the father figure in her life was William Bell. Before you think this is a happy picture, it was not even close. Her aunt, Isa McCricket herself, said that the minute Mary was born, Elizabeth was not thrilled. In fact, she wanted nothing to do with Mary at all, even going as far as to tell the nurses, "Take that thing away from me." She was also a known prostitute and dominatrix in the area, and she was often absent from the home to tend to her clients. More on this later. As for this moment, all you need to know is that things are already not off to a good start. William was the father figure who was also hardly home. He was always away at work, leaving Mary under the care of her siblings, or he was a violent drunk. He also had an arrest record for crimes that included armed robbery. He married Elizabeth when Mary was a baby. Thus, Mary took his name. So, with this picture, Mary was a neglected child. It was said that she would get injured very often in accidents while alone with her mom, which was a contributor to her family's belief that she was being neglected or abused in some way. Other family had offered to take Mary away to care for her, but Elizabeth would turn them away. But while turning them away, she would also make several attempts to abandon or poison Mary. On one occasion, Mary was sold to a mentally unstable woman. Thus, her older sister had to travel across Newcastle on her own to rescue her. Elizabeth would also use Mary as an accessory for her prostitution clients, letting them assault her on multiple occasions in sadomasochistic ways, all through to the mid-60s. In school, Mary was said to have been a bully. She showed numerous signs of being disturbed and unpredictable, including mood swings, unpredictable behaviors, bullying, and chronic bedwetting. A classmate at DeLayville Road Junior School said that she would get this look in her eyes and act a certain way, and when she looked and acted certain ways, other kids would know to steer clear of her. The other children were all able to see when she would show distressed mannerisms as well, like shaking her head and forming a steely gaze, which told them she chose violence today. The person she would direct this gaze at would be the person who became her target. She fought both genders and attempted to strangle several classmates on several occasions. On one occasion, she attempted to shove sand down another girl's throat. These behaviors, of course, made most children not want to be around Mary, which is kind of sad, but, kind of well deserved. But the one person that Mary did hang out with for most of the time was her neighbor Norma Bell, of no relation, and this friendship would turn into something fatal. So before we go on to what happened, I thought I would provide a little extra background about the time period we were in for this part of the world. Around the 60s, it was common for children to be alone on the streets playing, especially in the slums where Mary and Norma lived. Doors were also kept open despite that there were a lot of drunks and crimes in the area as well. Not much had changed since World War II, and there was a lot of domestic unrest during this time. Newcastle was one of the places that hadn't experienced wealth and prosperity like the other areas did. During this time, however, Newcastle upon Tyne experienced a significant urban renewal project to create a more modernized area, and people still lived in these areas during Reconstruction. These families were waited on to move. Local children would often play in these areas of the construction and demolition sites that were cleared by contractors. One such area was referred to as the Tin Lizzie, and this area was located on the street parallel to St. Margaret's Road, which was across the street from 70 White House Road where Mary had lived. Convenient, right? So, here's a precursor to the crimes. On Saturday, May 11th, 1968, a boy was found dazed, wandering, and bleeding on the vicinity of St. Margaret's Road, Scotswood. He later informed police that he had been playing with Mary and Norma in a disused air raid shelter. He wasn't exactly sure who pushed him, but the fall inflicted a severe laceration to his head. On the same evening, the parents of 3 small girls also came forward to police, stating that Mary and Norma had attempted to strangle the girls as they played in the sandpit with them. Mary, of course, denied it, but Norma admitted to the assault, saying that Mary had done it. One of her retellings was as follows. Mary went to one of the girls and said, "What happens when you choke someone? Do they die?" Then Mary put both hands around the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to go purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat and she started to go purple as well. Another girl, Susan Cornish, came up, and Mary did the same thing to her. Police notified the authorities of the incidents, but because of the age of the girls, they just gave them a slap on the wrist and let them go free. But this would turn out to be a fatal mistake, as this was only the beginning of what Mary Bell was capable of. So now we're going to go on to the actual killings themselves. If you are not comfortable with the slaying of children in any way, shape, or form, which I completely understand, please refrain from watching the rest of the video because the details that are mentioned here are pretty brutal and very uncomfortable. This whole case in general was just uncomfortable. So our story continues on the Tin Lizzie we mentioned earlier. As I said earlier, just so you get a better idea, Mary's house was located pretty much across the street from it. This was a place where a lot of local children often played, as it was one of the many construction sites that was just left open. On May 25th, 1968, the day before Mary's 11th birthday, Martin Brown's body was discovered by 3 children at 3:30 p.m. in an upstairs bedroom of a derelict house on 85 St. Margaret's Road. Martin Brown's mother, June, of course, heard about the incident immediately and was taken to an image that would plague her for the rest of her life. She said in an interview for the show Deadly Women that it was like a nightmare. She said he'd been laying on his back and his arms were stretched over his head. In another interview, she recounted that there was one construction man who had tears in his eyes. The body itself had specks of blood and foam by his mouth, but there were no visible signs of violence. A local workman, John Hall, had attempted CPR to no avail. As Hall had attempted the CPR, Mary and Norma appeared by the door of the bedroom and they were shooed out. Then, they knocked on Martin's Aunt Rita Findlay's door and told her, "One of your sisters, Barry, just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him." This was how Martin's mother came to find out. Martin was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, but pronounced dead. The following day, Dr. Bernard Knight conducted the post-mortem exam on the body. He was again unable to find any signs of violence on the body. Thus, he was unable to determine the actual cause of death. They knew, however, that the investigators' theory of Martin having died through ingesting tablets, which were found by his body, had been wrong. This piece of information of Martin's body being found near tablets would soon become very important. An open verdict was returned on June 7th, which meant the death was marked as suspicious, but no clear conclusion was reached at this time. So before the next killing took place, Mary and Norma broke into and vandalized a nursery in Woodland Crescent on Chester Pike today by peeling the tiles off of the slate roof. They tore some books, upturned some desks, and smeared ink and poster paints on parts of the property before leaving. The break-in was discovered and the police were called. When investigating, they discovered a series of handwritten notes, which they had no clue were left by the girls. And some of these notes were pretty brutal and terrifying. They looked like children had written them, and some of them read as follows: "I murder so that I may come back. We did murder Martin Brown. Fuck off, you bastard. Fuck off, you bastard. You are mice. Why? Because we murdered Martian, go Brown, you bite, look out. There are murders about by Fanny and old faggot, you screws." But unfortunately again, police found these notes and they just dismissed them as a childish prank. I don't know, man. I don't know. 2 days later, on May 29th, shortly before Martin's funeral, in a game of chicken, the girls knocked on Martin's mom, June's door. They asked to see Martin. When she told him he'd died, June remembers how Mary was the one who told her, "Oh, I know he's dead. I want to see him in his coffin," which pissed her off, of course. And June slammed the door in their face, having to be consoled after. There was a protest after Martin's death about the bad conditions of the construction sites, and that action should be taken to protect the children from further harm. The person at the front? Mary Bell. Now let's go to June 31st, 1968. 3-year-old Brian Howe was last seen by his parents playing in the street outside his house with his sister, the family dog, and Mary and Norma. He did not return home. This created concern. Family and neighbors searched, but no one could find him. At 11:10 p.m., his body was discovered between 2 concrete blocks on the Tin Lizzie. When police arrived, they saw a deliberate but feeble attempt to hide the body, which was also covered in grass and weeds. There was cyanosis, bluing of the lips, and scratches and bruises were evident on his neck. The sad part? There was also broken scissors laying next to the body, and an attempt to mutilate his genitals, cuts on his legs, and initials carved on his stomach. M.N. This was a clear attempt to leave a signature. A disturbing sign indeed for those involved in this case. But these scissors would also become very important later on in the investigation. The post-mortem exam this time concluded that Brian was obviously murdered. The cause was strangulation. He'd been dead around 7 hours before his body was found. The killer had apparently squeezed his nostrils closed with one hand and gripped his little neck with the other. Sections of his hair were cut. The force inflicted on the boy was feeble, so they came to the conclusion that the killer was indeed another child, and that Martin should be rechecked, because he may have also been murdered. At this scene, numerous fibers that were gray and maroon were found around the area of the body, but they did not come from Brian's household or outfit. Therefore, the conclusion was that these fibers were linked to his killer. This incident sparked a large-scale outrage and a manhunt for the perpetrator. The media went in a frenzy. June remembers the media referring to Martin as the Rat Alley Boy, which she found insulting, as it associated her beloved son to rats. Over 100 detectives across North Cumberland were assigned to the case, and over 1,200 children were questioned. A child psychiatrist was also hired. Mary and Norma were among some of the children questioned on August 1st. Several witnesses at this point had already come forward with info that they saw Mary and Norma with Brian before he'd gone missing. Upon questioning, Mary was observed to be observant and clever. Norma, not so much. But both were very evasive and also contradictory in their statements. They both, however, admitted to playing with Brian, but they said they did not see him after. Mary was questioned further the following day, stating that she saw an 8-year-old boy playing with Brian on July 31st, and she saw him hitting Brian as well. She also said she remembered the boy being covered in grass and weeds as if he had rolled in a field, and saw the boy had scissors in his possession. "I saw him trying to cut the cat's tail off with the scissors, but there was something wrong with them. One leg was broken or bent," she said. This was the statement that told Detective Chief Inspector James Dobson that he had his killer, as only the police had known about the scissors at the time. The boy she'd mentioned was also questioned, but was found to have been nowhere near the area, which was backed up by numerous witnesses. In fact, the boy had been at the airport. During the investigation, Mary's teacher also checked Mary's school journal. In it, a drawing of Martin Brown's body, exactly how it was found, tablets and all. On August 4th, Norma's parents called the police, saying they wanted to confess that she knew more about the death of Brian Howe. DCI Dobson came to their home and questioned Norma. Norma then told Dobson that Mary took her to the Tin Lizzie, to a spot where Mary showed her Brian's body. Mary then told her what happened, and how she strangled little Brian and had enjoyed doing so. Mary had also told Norma about cutting into Brian with the blade of the broken scissors. Mary had hidden the blade she cut Brian with, though. Norma led police to the razor blade, and a drawing Norma made was exactly what the coroner had found. May then said, "The blocks, Norma, away," and we went along to the concrete blocks. Then she said to Brian, "Lift up your neck." They claimed they were going to play a game, and Mary was going to, quote, "make his throat better." Just when she said that, there was some boys playing around and Lassie, Brian's dog, was barking. She had followed us down. May then said to Brian again, "Lift up your neck." This was a section of Norma's confession on August 4th, 1968. Apparently, on August 5th, Mary was visited in her home and got defensive when confronted about the discrepancies in her previous statements. She even went as far as to accuse the detectives of brainwashing her and said, "I'll get a solicitor to get me out of this." Norma was questioned again later that day and made a full statement where she now admitted to being present while Mary strangled Brian. Now she said that when the trio was alone on the Tin Lizzie, Mary, quote, "went all funny," pushing poor Brian into the grass and attempting to strangle him, after which Mary told Norma that she was getting tired and to take over. Instead of doing so, Norma ran from the scene and left Mary alone with Brian. The clothes of both girls had been examined, and it was revealed that the gray fibers we mentioned earlier that were found near and on Brian's body belonged to a wool dress that was owned by Mary. Maroon fibers found were confirmed to belong to a skirt owned by Norma. Brian was buried in a local cemetery on August 7th, 1968. 200 people attended the funeral service. According to DCI Dobson, who was going to go and arrest both girls later that day, Mary stood outside the Howe house and watched as his little coffin was carried out at the beginning of the funeral procession. He recounts, "She stood there laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do another one." At 8 p.m. that day, the girls were taken in and charged with the murder of Brian Howe. Mary said, "That's all right by me," while Norma bursted into tears, saying, I'll pay you back for this." Mary wrote a written statement in the presence of a witness, saying she was present when Brian was murdered, but she placed the blame on Norma. She also admitted that she and Norma were the ones who'd broken into the nursery and left all of the handwritten notes about Martin Brown and also defacing the property. Shortly after they were arrested, both girls underwent psychological evaluations. Norma was found to be intellectually delayed and submissive, and she easily displayed emotion. Mary, however, was bright and cunning. There were also sudden mood swings. She would be talkative one minute, then she rapidly became sullen, introspective, and defensive. 4 psychiatrists concluded that she was not mentally ill, but had psychopathic personality disorder. Dr. David Wetbury concluded, "Her social techniques are primitive and take form of automatic denial, integration, manipulation, complaining, bullying, flight, or violence." The trial began at Newcastle Assizes on December 5th, 1968. Both girls were tried before Justice Ralph Cusack. Both pleaded not guilty to their charges. Mary was defended by Harvey Robson QC, and Norma was defended by R.P. Smith QC. Also, on both defense counsel's protests, on the first day, Cusack waived the defendants' rights of anonymity because of their age, which allowed the media to publicize their names, ages, and photographs. They each sat at arm's length from their families in center of the court, next to plainclothed female officers and behind their legal representatives. Rudolph Lyons QC opened the case at 11:30 a.m. and stated to the jury that they faced an unhappy and distressing task due to the nature of the murders and the ages of the defendants. He also linked both Brian and Martin's deaths together and presented the evidence of the girls' guilt. He also stated that Mary was the more dominant of the girls, but also said both acted in unison and were equally culpable, killing for the pleasure and excitement of murder. He also added that both knew that what they did was wrong and what the result of their actions would be. On the 5th day of the trial, Norma testified in her own defense. She denied involvement in the actual murders of either child, but under cross-examination, she admitted to knowing about Mary's violent tendencies and history of attacking other children of both genders. She insisted that she never touched either child, and that when Mary had begun her attack on Brian, she had failed to alert that group of boys because of the uncertainty of what was going to happen if she did. On December 12th, it was Mary's turn to testify in her defense. Her testimony lasted 4 hours. She denied Norma's accusations, insisting that though she saw Martin's body, she never harmed him, and talked of asking June about Martin's body as a game of chicken. She also emphasized that her knowledge on Martin's death could, quote, get Norma put straight away. She also recounted of how she stood as if glue was pulling her down, quote, as she watched Norma strangle Brian. She said Norma had bribed Brian with sweets if he did what Norma told him. Then Norma proceeded to strangle him with her bare hands. She stated that she saw Norma had used a lot of force, as she saw her fingers turn white. She apparently didn't want to tell authorities either out of, quote, fear and a misguided sense of loyalty. Norma's mother testified that several months before Brian's murder, she and her husband discovered Mary attempting to strangle Norma's younger sister Susan. She only let go when Norma's dad punched Mary in the shoulder. Child psychiatrist Ian Fraser testified that Norma's mental age was only 8 years old and 10 months. And although she has the capacity to know right from wrong, it was very limited. She was capable of appreciating the criminality of the acts she committed as well. June recounts being there during the court proceedings, observing that Mary had not taken them seriously, as she'd been, quote, dancing around, laughing, and asking for sweets, and she felt like Mary was openly mocking the seriousness of the matter. She could not believe that this little girl had ruined her life. The trial lasted a total of 9 days, ending on the 17th of December. The jury took about 3 hours to deliberate. In the end, Mary was clear of murder, but convicted of manslaughter for both of the boys on the grounds of, quote, diminished responsibility. Norma, however, was acquitted of all charges. Upon hearing the charges, Norma clapped and was happy and excited. Mary, her mother, and her grandmother all wept. Judge Cusack described Mary as a dangerous individual, saying that she posed a very grave risk to other children and steps must be taken to protect the public from her. So Mary was sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which in England is an indefinite prison sentence. You may think the story ends there, but unfortunately it doesn't, as a lot happens while Mary is detained. She was first brought to Durham Remand Home, which was a detention home, but she got transferred to another home in South Norwood. She then was taken to Red Bank Secure Unit, which was a detention home for young offenders, in 1969. She was the only female among the 24 inmates. Mary would later say that while at this facility, from the age of 15, staff members and several inmates sexually assaulted her on several occasions. In November of 1973, at the age of 16, she was transferred to a secure wing in the HM prison Styal in Cheshire, which she resented. While there, she applied for parole, but got denied. In June 1976, she was moved to Moore Court Open Prison, where she undertook a secretarial work course. In September 1977, she made headlines when she and another inmate named Annette Priest escaped for a bit and spent a few nights with 2 young men in Blackpool, where they apparently went and enjoyed amusement parks and slept in a few hotels. Mary and Annette parted ways after this, and Mary had used the alias Mary Robinson. She was arrested in Derbyshire in the home of one of the men, Clive Shirtcliffe, on September 13th, and she was found to have dyed her hair blonde in an attempt to hide her identity. For punishment, her prison privileges were taken away for 28 days. In June of 1979, she was transferred to HM Prison Askham Grange, which was an open prison in Askham Richard Village. This was to prep her for her release back into society, which was planned to happen the following year. While there, she worked as a secretary beginning in November 1979. Then she was a waitress in a cafe in Yorkminster. After serving 11 and a half years, she was released from HM Prison, Askham Grange, in May of 1980 at the age of 23. She was granted anonymity and a new name, and it is said that all she wanted was to live a normal life and to be left alone. However, for a while, the media would not have it, and nor would the public. In May of 1984, 16 years to the day after Martin Brown died, she gave birth to a daughter. The daughter had no idea of her mother's past until reporters apparently discovered her location in Sussex Coast, where they had been living for only 18 months. The media outburst forced them to be taken to a safe house by undercover officers. They later relocated. It is also rumored that Mary returned to Tyneside and lived there for a bit too. After this, there was a huge fight over the anonymity of her daughter and any descendants, as again, Mary just wanted to be left alone at this point. The anonymity for her daughter was supposed to only last until she turned 18. On May 21, 2003, Mary won a high court battle to have her own anonymity and her daughter's extended for life. In 2009, it was updated to include her granddaughter as well. The order prohibits the divulging of any aspects of their lives that may identify them. Since then, their whereabouts have been unknown, which has created outrage in the families of the victims, for sure, who believed that Mary should have stayed locked up for life. In 1989, outrage was sparked again when a book by Gita Serini was published, which accounted Mary's life before and after the crimes. From this book, called Cries Unheard, The Story of Mary Bell, Mary details the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her mother and her mother's clients. Friends and family members were also interviewed for the book. The outrage? Mary was given £50,000 for this account, and the book also says that Bell knew she was not wrongfully convicted and that the abuse she suffered did not excuse her from her actions. But what about the victims? June is the only one who has come out and done interviews and speaks openly about the crime. It is her belief that Mary took Martin from her and took Brian's life as well, and that she did not even deserve to be released from prison at all. She's also made her opinion very clear, that Mary did not deserve to have any children or grandchildren of her own for what she did. All this time, June had felt the pain of losing her child, whom she remembered to be a prankster and a lovely little chap to be with. When Mary had her child, she went as far as to say, "I hope that when she looks at this child, she remembers the two she murdered." Now at this point you may be wondering, what exactly could cause a young girl to take the lives of two young boys? Serini said that Mary told her she knew the abuse she suffered did not excuse her actions, but many believed this was the trigger that set her off. Being abused sadomasochistically by her mother's clients and suffering abuse and neglect from her mother could have set her on this dark path, while still being a young girl. She could have been this bully as a way to take back the control she felt like she did not have at home. She could have killed those poor boys to retaliate against the men who had done her so wrong, and to take herself back from their disgusting behaviors toward her. And to top it all off, there was the mother who never really wanted her, used her for her dominatrix work, and also made several attempts to kill or abandon her. And the father figure, who was hardly ever present, and was also abusive when he was. It is also rumored her mother suffered from Munchausen by proxy, where a caregiver intentionally harms a dependent to gain attention for themselves. Betty loved attention. She would have all the attention in her sex work, would lie to family about Mary's health and injuries, and also act as though she wanted to give Mary up, only to take her back again later. This tumultuous behavior had to have a really big strain on Mary growing up, mentally and physically, that made her become devoid of emotions and empathy. But does that excuse her from having committed this crime? Hell no, it doesn't. She killed two small boys for fun. And I am going to be very honest when I say From the look of the situation, I kind of feel like Norma should have been imprisoned too. But not for the reason that you might think. It's just because of the fact that she had to have had some sort of involvement. She was there when the crime happened, and she may not have touched the boys at all, but she still was an accessory in this crime. And then comes the other question. Why the hell isn't Elizabeth in jail for what she did to Mary growing up? It's because of the way that she treated her that she probably turned into this psychotic killer. And to subject a 10-year-old to your sex work, especially sadomasochistic sex work, that's disgusting. Like, for real, I don't understand how no one called the police on this woman for abandoning her, for subjecting her to that, letting her get sexually abused all of that time. It's messed up, man. That's messed up. It kind of makes me wonder, what if Elizabeth didn't do that? What if Elizabeth just took responsibility, treated Mary the way a mother's supposed to treat her daughter, didn't subject her to that type of behavior, and just let Mary be a kid? Would Mary still have grown up to become this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about the situation when it comes to Elizabeth and Norma in this case. But if I'm being honest, I really feel like both of them should have been locked up. Norma because of the fact that she was an accessory to the crime, and Elizabeth because of the fact that she was clearly a negligent and abusive mother that deserved to be imprisoned. I truly feel like if Mary just got the help that she needed, if someone in the family intervened for real and didn't give two shits about what Elizabeth did or said, and just helped Mary, I kind of feel like Mary wouldn't have been a killer. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. Either way, now two families are scarred for life. They lost two children that were very sweet and kind and deserve to live the rest of their lives. And there are many children that were involved in this situation or knew Mary too that were scarred from Mary's behaviors. It also comes to show that looks can be deceiving. Anyone could commit a heinous crime like this, from your old lady neighbor to your friend to even a 10-year-old girl. Thanks for stopping by, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to this story today. I really appreciate it. And also, let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this new format of the show. I really would like to know, so that way, if you guys like it, this is the way I'll be able to continue it. And also, if you are new here, once again, do not forget to press subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you don't miss the future episodes. Trust me when I say it's gonna get better from here. Until then, stay safe, stay magical, and I will see you on the next one. Till then, ta-ta!